bwe wabaayo obulwadde bwonna obuluma mwami Yoweri Kaguta Tibahaburwa bwandibanga bumuluma kitono okukira obulwadde bwa Robert Kyagulanyi Bobi Wine. Mu bimpimpi omutawaana emiteeru Jenerali Yoweri Kaguta Tibahaburwa gyalimu gyonna yeetoolooledde ku Kyagulanyi. Kagabe mateeka galeeta entakera gonna geetoolooledde ku ngeri ki gyagenda okunafuyamu Robert Kyagulanyi Bobi Wine. Byonna byateekateeka okuviira ddala mu mwaka ogwa 2021 kubanga awo yatandikira okutegeera nti omuntu gwe yali anyooma, gwe yali atunuulira ekyamuli, gwe yali alabanga atalina kiddako, yali amufuukidde akayinja mu ngatto. Byonna okuva olwo byateekateeka ne byapanga byonna byetoolooledde ku ye. Bwe njagala okuwemu obufaananyi eggye ly'eggwanga lye twali tumanyi nti nno likolera ffe okutuuka akadde nga terikyakolera ffe directly nga likitulaga n'okukitulaga nti mu lwatu likolera mwami Tibahaburwa. Era njagala okuwemu akafaananyi bayimbi bameka, bakomediyani bameka abaali balimbalimba nti nno bali wamu mu lutabaalo lwabwe oba mu industry yaabwe, njogera ku music industry ne art, abaguliriddwa bonna nga bakunafuya Robert Kyagulanyi. Ne bannaddiini nno bangi ne batuuka n'okunaabuuka ekitiibwa kyabwe ne bakiteekako ebitoomi. Ne tandika okubalabira mu kifaananyi ekyamaganduula agatalina makulu. Ne tandikira okubalabira mu makanzu agatalina kye gagattako. Era nalabye ne mu Boston jjo Archbishop Mugalu ng'abaana tebaaluddewo kyaddaaki eggaali n'emuyitamu. Bino byonna nno lwaki mbikulambululira? Nkulaga amaanyi Robert Kyagulanyi Bobi Wine gaalina gaatadde ku Jenerali Yoweri Kaguta Tibahaburwa n'atuuka n'okumuleetera okukola ensobi. Nkubamu obufaananyi bwe mbanga nina bbanja nga lya rent, ng'ebbanja eryo linnemeredde pressure gye mbeerako. Ye mwami Tibahaburwa ayina international pressure okuva mu mawanga agabadde gamuvujjirira agamuggyeeko obuyambi. Ye mwami Tibahaburwa amagye agamu nga mulimu abantu abalina oludda ate olulala ku ye lwaliko. Ye mwami Tibahaburwa ayina ebitongole bye ebirala byonna ebyokwerinda, naye nga ebitongole mulimu abatamwagala n'abatamuwagira, nga n'abakungu be bennyini aba gavumenti baalonda n'ateeka ku mwanjo tebamwagala. Mbadde nkunnyonnyola ku bunkenke Jenerali Tibahaburwa bw'ayitamu ne bamulaba keera ng'akeera bwannawanca nga ne gy'alaga ffenna teri amanyiiyo. Obugagga ng'obwo obutaliimu mirembe Mukama Katonda abukuwonyanga, kubanga omukulu buli kimu akifunye mu bannayuganda okubabba ababbye, n'akola investment wano n'ebweru wa Uganda, naye talina kyagenda kubweyagaliramu. Gino gyali badde myaka gya kumutunuulira ng'ali lwakitula abwamye atudde nga teri amunyeganako, naye yalondawo oludda luno kubanga ye mutwe gwe olutalo kye kimu ku bintu ebimuvugiramu ng'eŋŋoma. Ye bw'awulira omuntu yenna ayagala okumugya ku ntebe ekimujjira mu bwongo, lutalo lumuvugira mu matu nga ngalabi. Robert Kyagulanyi Bobi Wine nate ku interview kwe yabadde mu ggwanga eri Amerika mu Columbia yakawaŋŋamudde, era bw'atyo n'ayogera ne ku tteeka erya Protection of Sovereignty Bill nga bwe ligendereddwamu okutagetinga ye. Naye nga tetunnaba kutuuka yeeyo okutunuulira n'okuttaanya engeri Bobi Wine gye yavuddeyo na rejecting ebyavudde mu kulonda ekintu ekitadde Byabakama ku nninga. Wa Byabakama ffenna tukimanyi bulungi enkola yalibadde bweti. Akalulu nga tonnakalangirira, teekayo ebivudde mu kubala akalulu ako. Omala okuteekayo ebivudde mu kubala akalulu ako, oteekeyo ne declaration form. Awo oluvannyuma bannayuganda nabo batandika okompayiringa, n'abeemulugunya bwe babaayo bajje beemulugunye, naye gwe walangirira akalulu. Kati we twogerera wakayitawo ennaku 10 n'okudda waggulu tobuuliranga bannayuganda bye walangirira gye wabijja, kubanga okubabuulira gye wabijja kuba mu kubiteekayo ku mikutu egya Electoral Commission eyayigattako akagambo independent naye ng'ate teri, kuba ne mu kulangirira akalulu waliwo ennyonyi namunkanga eyali eyita mu bwengula. Kakati ebigambo byongedde okuvaayo ku katambi akafuluma okuva mu kakiiko k'ebyokulonda akaleesewo contradiction ku byava mu kulonda, nga obululu obwaweebwa Robert Kyagulanyi Bobi Wine bwe bululu ate obwali obwa Yoweri Kaguta Tibahabulwa, ate obwaweebwa Yoweri Kaguta Tibahabulwa nga bwe bululu obwali obwa Robert Kyagulanyi Bobi Wine. Akatambi kano kafuluma ne nkugamba nti yenna yakatadde yabadde intentional, yabadde akigenderedde, yabadde ayina omulamwa, yabadde ayina ekiruubirirwa, kubanga baakata ku lunaku nga lwe bagenda okulangirira ebivudde mu kulonda, ku lunaku lwennyini lwe baali bagenda okulangirira ebivudde mu kulonda, nga weewuunye ne intaneti mu ggwanga teyaliiko, naye lwakiri eyandibanga ye yali communication oba okwatula eri bannayuganda nti ono teyawangudde Kalulu, yabbye kabbe. N'ekyokudireyinga okuteekayo ebyava mu kulonda kyokka kimala. Kirabika ye mwami Tibahabulwa yagamba Byabakama bw'otannangirira owedde, yennyonyi namunkanga eri gye twawuliranga etokota, nga Byabakama ayogedde ebigambo bino wammanga. Okulonda kubaawo, okulonda ne kuggwa, naye bye ŋŋenda okulangirira bannayuganda mukkakkane. Ennyonyi namunkanga neeyita mu bwengula mu kakiiko k'ebyokulonda. Kabonero kiggo ke yafunamu ng'omu nayiga nti intention ey'akalulu kano kaali kaakulangirirwa ku mudumu gwa mmundu, era nga bwe kyali. Kati akatambi kano kaviiriddeko Byabakama emitawaana, era bannayuganda ne bamuwa ultimatum ya nnaku ntono nnyo nti nga tetunnatuuka 12 kati ebebula ennaku 6 nga tetunnatuuka 12 Mei mwami Tibahabulwa n'akabinja kwe bateekateeka okulayira abe ng'ataddeyo ebyo ebyavudde mu kulonda, olwo bannayuganda babeere bakakafu, kubanga eggwanga lino lye tuwangaaliramu eyalondebwa munnange ate tafuga, ow'emmundu yafuga. Kati mu mbeera eyo ne bannayuganda Byabakama bamuteereddewo omuguwa, oba yeetuge, naye ate mu kumuteerawo omuguwa bamuteereddewo n'ekyambe nti bwadde ekyennyuma agenda gwa ku kyambe kimuyitemu kimutunge. N'olwekyo katugendeko mu katambi kano tumale okufuna ebigambo by'omwagalwa bangi Kyagulanyi briefly, ndyoka ate mbatwale mu bigambo oba mu mbeera bannayuganda gye bataddewo. Bino byonna yabyogeredde bweru wa ggwanga mu Columbia wali mu ggwanga eri America.
Museveni and his people have more or less made it clear that if you don't vote for me, there will be war. In northern Uganda, we go up and say, Bobi, we support you. But when we vote for you, there will be war. And you ask them, where is the war going to come from? Say, Museveni will fight. This is a person that started a war in 1980, and it consumed 500,000 people. The sacrifice was given, and it was supposed to be the end of the cycle of violence. But for him to, and indeed Mama says it, that you see now, let us just sit down and leave the man, because if we vote him out, he will fight. That's intimidation. I'll tell you that before I started dressing like this and trying to speak straight English, I was a bad boy from the ghetto. And I know a thing or two about violence. And the generation that I lead is hungry and angry. We have very little to lose, but everything to gain. And we are very capable of violence. But we chose non-violence because we know historically that violence has only bred violence. It only creates a vicious circle of violence. It breeds this sense of entitlement. Oh, we earned it, we spilled our blood, so you can't tell us that. I mean, we've learned that from the Museveni generation. That's why we are non-violent. But unfortunately, regardless of how non-violent we've been met with extreme violence, abductions, killings, and everything. We have preached non-violence all through the campaign. But on the day of election, I was raided. I was put on house arrest. Just less than 24 hours after the election, I was raided and I was forced out of my country. So while we believe in non-violence, we are slowly getting to a level where I will not be able to control the young people that want to free themselves by any means necessary. So the best way to avoid this violence is to have Museveni go peacefully. As a matter of fact, there are some people, many people who are beginning to persuade me to look more the Malcolm X way and say sometimes you have to pick up a gun to put down a gun. That is not what I'm encouraging, but I didn't say I'm discouraging it. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think also just on this question of violence, I have a lot of friends who say similar things.
But of course, there are also other powers getting involved in Uganda. The Chinese have launched some projects with the Museveni government under the Belt and Road Initiative. So I was just wondering, what is your general view on Chinese involvement? Obviously there's many downsides, and how would you approach these projects if one day, if everything goes well, you can assume your rightful place?
Thank you. As a citizen, I welcome any kind of development. And as a leader, when I'm president, and you notice I say when, not if. When I'm president, I will welcome all kind of moral development. Of course, I differ from Museveni. Museveni has dealt so much with the Chinese and Russians because their collaboration does not come with conditions like the US and the European collaboration used to be. It has no strings of democracy and human rights attached. For them, it is business. They don't care how you treat your people. Unfortunately, the US and largely Europe are seeming to go the China way now. Say, okay, now China is taking business from us. Maybe we should abandon the values and just deal with the dictator the way things are, so we don't lose Uganda to the Chinese. While that is beneficial in the short run, in the long run, it's very dangerous because they are dealing with an individual and not the people of Uganda. And when we, the people of Uganda, finally free ourselves, we are going to know who our real friends are, and we'll make the right decisions then. I don't know if I answer you in a way.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, 6 your hands. Okay.
Good evening, and thank you for being here. I'm Ugandan myself. I'm from the north, from Arua specifically. And among my friend groups and in the chat, there's two sentiments that are echoed. The first is that some people don't think you're serious about really being a political candidate, that because you spend more time outside and it feels like you're pushing more Bobi Wine the artist and going to award shows. I don't believe it, I'm just sharing. As opposed to being the presidential candidate, that's serious. The second question, if you'll allow, is that your personal bodyguard, Eddie, who's currently being treated like a terrorist for stealing his sweater, what's your plan to help him, especially if you're spending more time out of the country, allegedly, instead of being home?
Thank you. It's interesting. Yeah, for the record, I'm an artist and a good one. In fact, I'm a star. That is supposed to be an advantage, not a disadvantage. You know, it has given me an edge over other politicians. And of course, they're going to fight it, they're going to try to ridicule it, they're going to try to make me sound or seem unserious. Am I serious about being president? Hell yeah! I've run and I've won the presidency twice. You can't be more serious than that. I spend more time outside Uganda than in Uganda. I also want to make it clear that I'm not here voluntarily. I'm here because I ran to exile, although many times I say it, albeit rather in denial that I'm not in exile. But technically I am, because I ran to save my life. Now, those that say that they resemble somebody who's going to beat you and say you cry so loud. I'm not in my country because I want to be alive some more. I want to postpone my execution. Like you are aware, the opposition leader that inspired us, Dr. Kizza Besigye, is in prison, not because he committed a crime, but because he's feared. That's why he's in prison.
Mu kanyomero ke kamu omwagala abangi Kyagulanyi era mu ggwanga eri Amerika gy'atadde amakanda gy'ayimiridde ku magulu ga abiri n'ateeka Byabakama ku nninga, amugambye nti mu kabanga akatali kawala ateekeyo ebivudde mu kulonda ng'embeera tennaba kubeera ng'egaga. Katumale okubifuna nate mu katambi nkomewo.
More efficient, not just peaceful, because people lose faith, people lose power, people lose what is their worst, their lives. So what we should do. And last but not least, 3 years ago I visited Uganda, and I made videos, like a movie about my trip in Eastern Africa. I tried to reach your team regarding copyrights because I used your songs in my video. Unfortunately, I didn't get any response, so I just used your songs. I mentioned who is the doctor, Bobi is the singer. Sorry, there are no royalties because this is a commercial video. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my sister. First of all, I'm glad to meet you. Every time I meet a person from an oppressed country, it's like I've met a brother or sister because we share the same plight. For clarity, my music, and I made it clear that anybody that uses my music for revolutionary purposes and for purposes of benefiting humanity, they are free to use my music. So don't worry, and encourage other people to use my music for the benefit of humanity. That's the least I contribute. And I'm very glad you visited Uganda. Now you asked a very intriguing question. What other strategy? Here in America, there were arguments back in the day between Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. While Martin Luther King was advocating for non-violence, and Malcolm X was saying that it is immoral and indeed criminal to tell people not to fight back. When a murderer comes to your house, you're not going to sweet talk them away. And yes, reading the history of the great Nelson Mandela, he taught us that non-violence works when the oppressor has a conscience. But when the oppressor has no conscience, non-violence doesn't work. I mean, we have protested and they've massacred people, young people, babies, Gen Zs in Kenya and Tanzania came to protest non-violently on the street, and they were mowed down. Painfully, the international community, the supposedly moral world, the free world, looked on, and before long they were pouring billions in Tanzania like they do in Uganda and other countries. Therefore, what other strategy? There's what is ideal, and there's what is real. The ideal is not violence. The real is violence. However, I'm persuaded that the ideal can actually be real. Non-violence can work. How does it work? These dictators would not be able to mow people down if they did not have a wind beneath their wings. For example, if America said you cannot kill people, those people will not be killed. Especially in countries that depend on America and Europe. Well, maybe in China, Iran and other countries, it can stand. I was at a conference with a brother from China, and he was asking for my advice. Says, I come from China and this and that. What do you advise me? Because I'm an advocate for democracy, I'm an activist, defending human rights and democracy in China, but now I have to end up running to exile. What do you advise me? I'm like, what do I advise this guy? I honestly told him, bro, you have a big problem. Because for me, my dictator is funded by the West. And if I can either provoke the conscience of the West to stop funding them, I will be home and dry. But your oppressor is rich and does not need any funding from the US. So I don't know what to do for you. Same way, in Uganda, and by extension in Africa, if the international community said we are not going to relate with you when you're killing your own people, when you're murdering your own people, non-violence will work. But for as long as the international community is complacent and is going to look the other side when people are being killed, then there's a big question on non-violence. Unfortunately, they are the same that are very quick, very, very quick to sanction the people that are trying to free themselves by any means necessary. So that's the challenge. That's the more reason why we continuously come to the West and ask them to evoke the moral tools that they have, the targeted sanctions against gross human rights violators. Recently, I saw them sanction the former president of Congo. But there is a sitting president in Uganda and a military commander that commits this crime in real time and is not shy, is not even pretending to hide them. Then why not sanction them? When we get that, the non-violence works. And maybe I'll say that once we free Uganda, it will not only be freedom for Uganda, but it will become a base for all other freedom fighters to base there and free their countries. We don't have so many countries as of now. That's why I want to give a base. And maybe when you free Belarus before we free Uganda, hopefully we can make it a base to free Uganda as well. Thank you.
Program eno nga bulijjo tutambudde ne Sheikh Ashraf omulombi w'edduwa. Munoonyeeko ku namba yo eri awo gwe nalina embeera muyita etali nnungi akulombera edduwa embeera ejja kubeera nga te efuuka malidaade. Robert Kyagulanyi Bobi Wine omwagala abangi nate era ayogeddeko ku by'okuwamba kwa Ibrahim Traore n'amawanga amalala ag'enjawulo agabadde gajja gabaamu kudita. Katumale nabyo okubifuna bye mba nfundikira nabyo video yaffe eyakadde kano. Abankumire Lugaba atakumira mpeera, abanyongererewo wonna we mujja ne kaddata oba oliawo ke mutugabirira ayongere ate okubagonnomolako favor. Kale katugende mu katambi kano nkomewo.
Authoritarianism, even if it was Jesus who brought authoritarianism, I would be against it. I love Traore, or rather I loved Traore. I'm one fan of the great Thomas Sankara. I mean, we wear this red beret as inspired by Thomas Sankara, as inspired by Che Guevara and all those other revolutionaries. I loved Museveni. I've read his books, and I'm sure the Museveni of then, when he was my age, that's the reason he was able to persuade your father to join him to go and risk their lives to liberate Uganda, or do what they call liberation. However, I disagree with any leader that claims to be representing people without getting the mandate of the people. America was created out of a war that had a saying, no taxation without representation. You cannot claim to be representing people when you don't get their mandate. I love what Traore says. I would love to love what he does. You know, like many people, I was fascinated when Ibrahim Traore took over. Yeah, he claimed it was corruption and the good words that we all love to hear. We all disagree with imperialism. We all disagree with modern day colonialism. But while we disagree with colonialism, we even disagree more with being colonized by people of our own color. You know, in this day and time, citizens should have a right, and leaders should govern in interest of their citizens and with mandate, and should be accountable to the people. So a short while ago, when Traore had just come, I made a statement and said, yeah, I love Traore. I support him. He's very popular. How I wish he gave the people of Burkina Faso the chance to elect him so they can feel like he's their servant and not their boss. I don't believe in bosses. As leaders, I believe in servants. So if Traore gave the people of Burkina Faso a chance to vote him into power, then he would be their servant and not their boss. You know, but over time, of course, when he abolished the Electoral Commission, I questioned. Recently, when he dismissed democracy, I was so heartbroken. And it reminds me of Museveni's great quote. Africa's problem are leaders. Africa's problem in general, and Uganda's problem in particular, are leaders that overstay power. When a leader becomes all-powerful, then he's governing on his own behalf and not behalf of the people. Then the people become his subjects. They cease to be citizens, they become subjects. And that should not be anywhere in Africa or the world in 2026. So for me, I think that any leader, and I won't be dead, I know you're trying to be careful. I won't be careful because I hate to be politically correct. I would rather say it the way it is, that any leader, regardless of how sweet the words they use, should be answerable to the people. I believe in servant leadership. And anybody that governs with a gun is an oppressor. How else are people going to check him? How are they going to question him? You know, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts, absolutely. That is how Museveni began. That is how all these other, that's how Robert Mugabe began. I was named after Robert Mugabe, you know, because he was a great revolutionary. By the time I was born, by the time he passed away, he was a despised tyrant. Now I can imagine how it's going to be 5, 10, 20 years from now in Burkina Faso. I mean, Burkinabes produced Traore. That means there are millions of Traores in Burkina Faso. Let them be inspired by him, but let him set a good precedent where leaders are questioned by the people, are answerable to the people, and are governing according to the interests of the people. But most importantly, leaders should be subjected to the interests of the people so that people can vote you in and vote you out. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that.